I'm joined today by Lloyd Evans, who is a writer and activist against the Watchtower Society, which is the Jehovah's Witnesses hierarchy. He's a former elder in the religion and a graduate of one of its ministerial training courses. You may recognize Lloyd. He previously joined us under the name John Cedars. So before we get started, Lloyd, explain to the audience the name change, if you will.
Well, when I was writing under the name John Cedars, I was under threat of being shunned when I first started writing. So the pseudonym was to protect me from being punished by Watchtower. But eventually I decided to just leave the organisation anyway, regardless. So now that I've left, there's no longer a reason for me to write under a pseudonym.
So the topic of today's interview is a recent video that was uncovered, which is sort of like an animated cartoon type video that was put out there by the Jehovah's Witnesses. And it's a video that is essentially, I'll let you characterize it, but to me it seemed like a video that demanded compliance from children under threat of harm. Is that a good way to put it?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, basically, what Watchtower's doing at the moment on its website, and it actually has two main websites. There's jw.org and there's now tv.jw.org, and they're both basically propaganda websites. And Watchtower is using videos more and more to connect with witnesses, and rather sinisterly, in my view, it's using videos to indoctrinate children, because Watchtower knows full well that you can't really make Jehovah's Witnesses by knocking on doors anymore. If you want to make a Jehovah's Witness, you need to indoctrinate one from childhood. So it's produced a series of videos called Become Jehovah's Friend, and the very latest one contains what I would call a very explicit threat that says if you don't pay attention at meetings, you can look forward to the same fate as someone who was drowned during Noah's flood.
There seem to be some parallels that I'm increasingly noticing between Scientology and the Watchtower. And, I don't know whether some people would say all religions are cults to some extent, others would not. But to the extent that both Scientology and Jehovah's Witnesses are cult-like, it seems that we have a desire from both to get to children at a very young age. We've talked to former Scientologists about being brought into the Sea Org quite early. Maybe the Sea Org is equivalent to the Watchtower Society within Jehovah's Witnesses. I'm not totally sure. And then the use of threats to get compliance. And of course, this applies to much more than just Scientology and Jehovah's Witnesses. But you experienced this firsthand, did you not?
I did, yes. I mean, you've actually had on your show a very distinguished guest. I'm a huge fan of his, Lawrence Krauss, and he made the point in one of your interviews with him that child indoctrination is a form of abuse, and I would concur with that. I mean, as regards cults are concerned, I find the whole cult word problematic because it's essentially a subjective term. I mean, if I were to call someone a criminal, if they've been convicted in a court of law, then I can rightly call them a criminal. But there is no external arbiter to decide whether you can call a religion a cult or not. It's a purely subjective term. But I would, of course, say Jehovah's Witnesses are a cult. And I would actually say they're far more dangerous than Scientology, because there's the recent film that's come out about Scientology, Going Clear, based on the book by Lawrence Wright. And it's very clear in that film that it's actually a very small religion, Scientology. There's only maximum 50,000 members. Jehovah's Witnesses have 8 million.
And the other difference, I think, that makes maybe the Jehovah's Witnesses more dangerous would be that Scientology is a very clear and distinct religion from Christianity, whereas Jehovah's Witnesses are still, at least externally, under the umbrella of Christianity. I don't know if internally they also consider themselves that way.
Yeah, I mean, the beliefs of Scientology are absolutely nothing to do with Christianity at all. In fact, it's rather it's like a comedy show when you look into some of the beliefs of what Scientologists adhere to. But with Scientology, what you have is essentially a religion that harms people if they're in the Sea Org. I'm probably oversimplifying things now, but if you're in the Sea Org, then you're working at a Scientology building, and you are being, in some cases, tortured, definitely humiliated, and you're having your life taken from you. Scientologists in the Sea Org sign a billion-year contract.
Right.
We don't really have anything comparable with Jehovah's Witnesses, unless you want to count working at the Watchtower headquarters as working in the Sea Org. but I don't think you get the same kind of abuse. What you do have with Jehovah's Witnesses is rampant child abuse, rampant shunning, which is a similar problem with Scientology, but with Jehovah's Witnesses it's far more widespread simply because there are more Jehovah's Witnesses. You have problems with blood transfusions, people denying basic medical treatment on trumped up religious grounds. I could go on, but it's just a pure scale. And when you mix in this very potent doomsday apocalyptic message, people seem to think that with Jehovah's Witnesses, it's just a case of take it or leave it. If you want to live in a paradise earth, what a wonderful thing you can look forward to. But what a lot of people don't understand, and I'd really like your listeners to understand this, is that when you see a picture of paradise earth in a Jehovah's Witness publication, that paradise earth, if you were to step inside with a shovel and start digging, you'd find it's been built on the bones of billions of people who've been slaughtered for the crime of not being Jehovah's Witnesses. You will die, according to Jehovah's Witnesses, unless you change your mind just before Armageddon comes. And this is a message that's being instilled not just in adults, but in children as well.
Let's talk about that a little bit. You underwent, I guess it's called an Armageddon drill when you were younger by your parents, where they said, the Great Tribulation, I don't know if it's here or it's coming soon, and you needed to take concrete steps to prepare for that, right?
Yeah, well, Jehovah's Witnesses have what's called a family worship evening, where parents are supposed to basically undergo indoctrination of their children for maybe an hour or so. And when I was a child, I basically was confronted by my dad one evening on the phone, and he was having a fake phone conversation, and he sounded like he was talking to one of our local elders. When he came off the phone, he said, well, our the Great Tribulation is upon us, and our congregation are all meeting at the Kingdom Hall, and we're going to drive to a nearby forest, and we're going to hide from the authorities because Armageddon's coming. So I took it completely seriously and ran upstairs and started stuffing random things into my rucksack, thinking I was in a survival situation. And it was only when I came downstairs and saw the smiles on my parents' faces that I realized that the joke was on me. But
was it a joke, or was it a sort of test to see if you would comply?
I think it was more of a test. I think that there was definitely a humorous element to it, but my dad and my mum, my mum's since died, but my parents took the whole concept of Armageddon deadly seriously, and they wanted us to take it seriously too. So it was very much a practical test to see how ready we were for confronting Armageddon. For those few minutes, I can look back now and laugh, but for those few minutes when I was running upstairs and packing things into my rucksack, it was Armageddon for me. I feel as though I've lived through what Armageddon would have felt like, only obviously it was all fictitious.
You mentioned that only one of your parents is still with us. What's the relationship like? And I don't know if there are other family members that are or were part of the Jehovah's Witnesses, but what's the relationship like now that you've left?
Oh, I'm being shunned. I've been disavowed, and the relationship was right up until I left. It was literally a case of, I live in Croatia, and my dad came for one final holiday. He didn't know it was his final holiday, but I wanted to use the opportunity to say to him, look, I'm leaving the religion. And I took the opportunity to sit down with him, one evening and explain to him what would be happening. And he said, well, I will be shunning you after you leave. And he stayed true to that word. There is what's called necessary contact. I think if someone were to die, he would let me know. But that's about it. And that is what the religion does to families. And I'm not the only one. There's countless people like me.
And is there, would any family member who does not shun someone that should be shunned, according to Jehovah's Witness doctrine, are they subsequently shunned themselves?
That's a very good question. In Jehovah's Witnesses have an elders textbook which lists all the laws that are applicable, and basically it's not actually an enforceable law. So if my dad wanted to, in theory, he could not shun me and still stay a Jehovah's Witness. He wouldn't allow to be an elder, which is what he is. He would be deleted as an elder if he were to do that. But the simple fact is that if you read witness literature where it says to not even email people who leave, and you're listening to the various convention talks and meeting talks, it's very, very unequivocal that you're not to have anything to do with people who leave. And people like me, who are outspoken against the organization, are called mentally diseased in Watchtower literature. So it's, even though it's not necessarily punishable, it's very, very much stigmatized.
We've been speaking with Lloyd Evans, writer, activist against the Watchtower Society, which is the Jehovah's Witness hierarchy. Lloyd, really great to have you on again.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, David.